Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Audible Waters Podcast. I am your host, Ralph Jesperson. This week, I go over the fifth time that I have seen Jesus in a dream. I'm doing this now to cheer up anyone who has watched the prior week's videos with all the bad news that they brought. With Christmas coming right up this week, this is exactly the good news that we need, as Jesus is still the light of the world and the Prince of Peace. He is the answer to all of the craziness in this world that is getting worse month by month as they pass. So, with no further ado, here it is in a form that you can read or listen to, or both.
The morning of April 30th, 2020, I had the following dream where Jesus appeared in it. Jesus was driving this machine, which was designed to pump concrete into a construction site, leveling it for future use as a floor for a house. The construction site was rectangular, with the width much larger than the height from the point of view I was seeing it. Jesus was driving this machine, hooked up to a hose pumping concrete into it. The machine was set with a setting for elevation of -2 inches. Jesus started on the left end of the site, driving the machine away from me, starting at the bottom of the site and heading straight up towards the top. The machine moved slowly as the liquid concrete was made perfectly level, filling in the ground underneath it. When the machine had finished filling in and leveling all of the concrete on the leftmost end, Jesus drove it off the site and above, where he turned the machine around so it was now facing me off to the right of where he had just finished. Then he slowly drove it towards me, filling in the next section with perfectly level concrete. When he reached the bottom, he again drove off the building site, turned the machine around and started on the next section just to the right of the last. This continued, moving to the right each time until the whole of the building site was filled with perfectly level concrete. Then Jesus moved the machine back to where he had started and waited for the concrete to set up sufficiently in order to be able to continue. He adjusted the height setting from -2 to 0. Once enough time had passed to continue, he again drove onto the far left end of the site and pumped a second layer of concrete on top of the first. I became aware that this was a different mix than before. The first was designed to be an underlayment, and this was a top coat, 2 inches thick, designed just for this purpose. I watched Jesus do exactly what he had done before with the top coat of concrete. The machine moved slowly but left a perfectly level floor behind it. When Jesus had finished going up and down again from left to right, the whole of the floor was complete, and it was now time to let it dry. Then I woke up.
A little later, after falling asleep again, I had another dream that did not appear to be spiritual at all. However, I woke up after a voice in that dream said something to the effect that it will take about 10 years in order to complete the process. Then I wondered if an angel had been sent to interrupt my dream and give me more information about how long the building process I saw Jesus doing was going to take. The fact that this woke me up leads me to believe that this might very well be true, that Jesus was starting a church building project that will take 10 years to lay out the ground floor and complete it. So here is my current best interpretation of what I saw. Jesus is busy building a house that we all can dwell in. That house is called his church. From Matthew 16:18, and I say to you that you are Petra, Peter, and on this Petros rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, death, will not overpower it. by preventing the resurrection of the Christ. At the same time that Christ is building his church his way, there is also a deconstruction. At the same time that Jesus is building his church his way, there is also a deconstruction of things built by man going on. This is necessary as there is not room for them both. In a number of lunches that I used to have with a former pastor of mine, we would talk about the deconstruction of the church in its form it currently exists. He was seeing this as something that started years ago, but now it can be argued that this has been accelerated to a great extent. As I have been saying for some time now, what is happening now will result in a literal bankruptcy of many a Fox Christian organization. We are told that Jesus is the head of the church, but in many organizations, he is just a figurehead that is brought out periodically, and words are put in his mouth about how great that organization is. But if Jesus isn't the actual head making the very real decisions, then he has been supplanted by some mere human and some modern day neo Pharisee. We are witnessing the beginning of the fall of many man made systems around this world. God is doing this in order to replace those things with systems of his own design. We should not be worried or anxious by what is happening, but should rejoice that God's kingdom is actually coming and that his will is being done in our midst even now. His will is upsetting to the carnal man, for it has always been so. But for those who have eyes to see, there is a great deal of hope now, more than I have ever seen before in my lifetime. What Jesus builds is level. It is not crooked or lumpy. Mark chapter 1 verse 3 talks about John the Baptist and his purpose, a voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight paths for him. We are the ones who are crooked, and what we make ends up being crooked too. When we build anything that does not have Jesus as the actual cornerstone, then we are building on sand and not the rock of Jesus Christ. This reminds me of the Keith Green song called Unless the Lord Builds the House. Jesus is patient. He is not in a rush like we often are. Jesus takes his time making sure that everything is done correctly. The result is a floor that will be perfectly level and that will be stable. This brings me to a story about how critical stability is. The first house for sale that I went to look for in this town of mine had a concrete floor that had completely failed. It was built on top of clay and the soil moved around underneath the floor after it was built. The result was two bedrooms where the floor had cracked into three sections. In the middle of each room, one of the sections was sitting up 2 inches higher than the other one. The living room had a huge crack in it too, where the floor was crumbling. The whole house was useless. Someone had bought it at an auction for very little. They came in and ripped up the carpet to see what the floor looked like and hastily left without cleaning any of it up. They were trying to sell the house at full value when it was actually completely worthless. They thought they got a good deal, but got a real severe lemon instead. I share this story to show how important it is that a concrete floor start level and stay that way. Much of what is called Christianity or Christian ministry today is actually like this house I saw. It looked normal outside, but when you step inside of it and see what it actually looks like inside, you keep tripping over the floor that has failed and is badly cracked. The scandals in Christian orgs are just when the news makes its way outside of the building. The scandals exist because man has built the house instead of Jesus Christ. The problem is not just one bad egg in the house, but the entire system that built it in the first place and is trying to maintain a facade that looks good enough to keep attracting people to enter it. The damage is not always clear just by entering once and visiting, but make that your home and you will really see what the reality is. What Jesus is building, he is using concrete to make. That is because the things of man are temporal. They pass away with the wind, never to be seen again. The ancient empires of man are all gone because what can be shaken has been. Their glory is no longer here. But what Jesus builds cannot be shaken because the scriptures said that it can't. Just see Hebrews chapter 12, 27 to 29. There is much with a Christian label superficially placed over it that will soon pass away because it was not built on the cornerstone of Jesus Christ. Everything that is now failing and passing away is not concrete, but spiritually nebulous. Jesus does not build mere facades, but with that which has real substance. That is why the floor was being made with concrete. It will replace that which was made by man that is not concrete in this sense. What Jesus builds will last. A floor is being laid out as a part of this building process. What we think of as church or ministry is not exactly what Jesus thinks, but we all appear to assume that it is. The end time church is just now in the very beginning of the building process. It has no walls, no roof yet, but it does have a cornerstone and a deep foundation that will stand up to everything the devil throws against it. Jesus is now working on the concrete floor. The machine moves slowly as this will not be a rapid process. This will take some time just to get the floor done, dried, and ready to be used by people. This floor is a two-step process. This process is not going to start on the conservative right wing of the church. It is apparently is going to be starting on the liberal left wing. That makes sense to me as the left has largely thrown away the scriptures as something that is concrete and something that needs to be respected and followed. This is the part of the church that has lost its conscience in many important ways. The right is screwed up too, but at least when pressed with their hypocrisy, they have to admit that the word contradicts their actions. But the left just claims that the history is fiction and that very little is to be taken literally. Once this move is complete, there will be a break between it and part two of this move, which will contain different ingredients. The subfloor must have time to dry and be ready for the next step. The first move creates the substrate for the second part to cover. Together, they will make up the floor for the workers to stand on when the next part of the house gets built. There will be a pause again after the floor is truly complete in order for it to solidify and the next phase of construction, which is normally the outside walls, can be built. Part two will again start with the left, liberal part of the church and slowly make its way towards the center and finally to the far right. Together, these two will be similar, but not exactly the same. The second move will be more visible as it will be what people see as the floor going forward. The first move will not be visible going forward, but it will be absolutely foundational and it will hold up what is visible. I do not know why the top coat is 2 inches thick, but I expect that it will become obvious at some point in time. Maybe when Jesus starts laying it down on top of the first. All of this will take some time. Perhaps it will take about 10 years and will be going on throughout the decades of this 20s of ours. I would not be surprised if likewise this decade of the 20s will end up looking very much like the 30s of last century. The current worldly deconstruction may very well continue at the same time Jesus is building his concrete floor. That will give men a reason to lose their wrongly placed faith in fellow men and their systems they created and replace it with a faith in Jesus Christ and what he is building. I also now am wondering if the top coat will be the preaching of the coming kingdom of God. This cannot start, I think, without a proper fear of God first. The coming kingdom of God is a violent political revolution. This is not from the ground up, but from the skies with the king down. Those who fear God will want to prepare for this, which is not looking to some weird rapture to remove them from this earth, but for a change of mindset and attitude. Instead of promoting the vain idol of the U.S. Constitution, we will be warning people to stop looking to men in merely human political parties for their future provision and safety. There is a king coming, and we need to fear him and find ourselves ready at his return. Jesus himself said in Matthew 24, verses 45 to 47, "Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose masters find him doing so when he returns. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his possessions." This is not just some kind of symbolic language for the next life. This will literally happen one day. How can the rest of this house be built unless you start with wise and faithful servants who actually fear the king? This statement is a political one, and clearly and plainly so. I will close this out with one more observation. I got this dream just as the whole pandemic craziness was ramping up towards its maximum. It was a bit of hope that God has a purpose behind letting a genetically modified virus escape from a lab full of idiots and infect the entire world. That was a man-made curse, and not the first, and certainly will not be the last. The war in Europe is also a man-made curse, as we now move towards a very bad recession coming. That is also a man-made thing, as simple greed causes the boom and bust cycles we now experience. But God has a plan and is building something new in the background, so do not despair at whatever circumstances you now have or will have in the near future. Jesus has plans to build beauty out of the ashes of what man has built. I encourage you to look to him and to find that peace he promised, that one that surpasses understanding in all bad circumstances. Next week, I plan to do an episode on Mount Promise. Until then, I wish you a very Merry Christmas with another one of my songs off of my whole instrumental Christmas album that I made. Here again is the link to that playlist, and here is just one more song off of that.